Prior to that, Kerry worked for many years in hospice care, and she provides supportive counseling to patients and their families during their cancer treatment and beyond. She specializes in working with patients who have young children and teenagers, and she provides education on speaking with kids about cancer, as well as offering supportive counseling to children as well. She has been facilitating programs with us at Cancer Support Community Central New Jersey for over 8 years and has presented at various conferences, including our Strengthening Our Schools over the years, on topics of children and cancer. Kerry is married to her husband, Mike, and together they have 3 children of their own, ages 11, 10, and 8. So again, welcome, Kerry. Welcome back to answering difficult questions, how kids talk about cancer.
Thank you, Catherine. It's great to be here again. I do love the Strengthening Our Schools conference because I think schools play such an integral role in our children's lives. And I'm always amazed when I say to parents, you know, have you talked to the school yet? And sometimes they'll say, no, why would I do that? Why do I need to do that? And it just amazes me. I see my kids' teachers and the adults that are in that school as being my teammates and helping to raise my child in terms of looking out for their well-being and the amount of time that they spend in that school. And so I need them on my side for my own kids. So I know the role that you play in their lives as well. So I'm going to give this speech as though we are not in the middle of a pandemic and kids are actually in the school. Let me go to sharing my screen here for you. So we're going to just pretend as though we are able to have kids in the building all the time. My kids are home learning virtually, so I applaud you and all your efforts for what you're doing to try to teach kids in the classroom, outside of the classroom, and everything else. I know your jobs have not been easy this year. And we're going to talk about some of the different people in the school and how their roles can help influence kids. So I just want to give a brief overview. These statistics are a little bit older, I have to update them. But in 2011, for example, at Overlook alone, which is a hospital in northeastern New Jersey, in Summit, we had a total number of oncology patients was about 1,700. And I would say the ones who are of childbearing age and would have school-age children are anywhere in these age groups. So you can see the numbers there. We're talking about several hundred patients who may have children who are then in your school. So I work all with adult patients who have children. So I'm going to talk about this as though we're talking about a child in your classroom whose parent has cancer, but you can also factor in some of the same kind of conversation if the child themselves has cancer, if they have a sibling with cancer, things of that sort. So we'll talk a little bit about cancer in general as well. One thing I want you to keep in mind when I say the word cancer out loud to you as a grown-up, what does that word mean to you? What are the images that come to your mind? We as grown-ups have all of this life experience, and so we have an understanding of what words mean. In the same way a kindergarten teacher is defining, you know, what a giraffe is, we're going to define that word cancer in some ways for those children. They don't always have that preconceived understanding of it. Perhaps they do, especially older kids. They may have heard about it. They may have had another family member who's had it, things of that sort. So we want to be mindful of what we know of cancer and then what children know of cancer and what their life experiences are. I would also keep in mind, we can also think of this too in the context of if there's a staff member at the school that has cancer, and we've seen that before, where maybe the staff member takes a leave and they were, you know, everybody's favorite 5th grade teacher is now out with this leave of absence. These kids are going to be emotional about it. So we want to really try to give them our attention. So some things to think about when you're thinking about cancer is a diagnosis. There's a lot of different types of cancer, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And prognosis. Those are some things that we generally use to talk about cancer. When you're thinking of your past experiences, it's really important to allow for your own feelings and think of your fears of it. What is your experience of it? Perhaps talking about cancer with a child makes you cry. And that's okay. I have many parents, when I say to them, you know, we talk about how to tell their child that they have cancer, and they say, how am I going to tell them without crying? And I say, you're not. You're not. You're going to cry, and it's perfectly okay. It's a normal response. In fact, now you're teaching your child what to do when they're sad, what to do when they have that emotion. And so as the teacher who's listening to the child tell their story, or the guidance counselor, or the nurse, or the coach, or whoever it is, if it makes you cry a little bit, that's okay, because that's just letting them know how much you care about them. And it's okay for them to see that, because we're going to talk through a little bit about how you can normalize that feeling for them. So again, children are a blank slate. They're developing this language. They're developing an understanding of cancer and illness and all of that as they go along in this process. And so it's really important that we're giving them the words along the way to fully understand what's happening. So cancer is a really complex illness, and I put all the pictures here because it's the middle of October, and we have breast cancer awareness everywhere, which is somewhat overwhelming for breast cancer patients even, but it's really overwhelming for non-breast cancer patients who feel like, what about us over here? So it's just really mindful of how we talk about it, how we think about it. It's really important that when you're getting information from a family, for example, knowing what the diagnosis is, if they're willing to share a little bit about that prognosis. But these are some things that the kids may know, so it's helpful for you to know what those things then mean. We talk a little bit about metastatic disease, which means, which is the same as a stage 4 illness. So for example, when a cancer is started in a breast, but now is in their lungs or their bones, that's metastatic. It's the same cancer, but it's now traveled to other areas of the body, as opposed to if I have breast cancer and then I get lung cancer. Those are two separate cancers. So there's a little slight nuance there, and the treatment is a little bit different. But metastatic cancer is cancer that is spread to other areas of the body, and generally speaking, those patients will always have cancer. We will do everything we can to treat it, but it's always going to be there. Some of the treatment options that patients will be going through are chemotherapy, radiation. Chemotherapy is an IV medication that's administered in a hospital or an infusion setting. Radiation is kind of like an X-ray, but a really fine pinpointed laser type of X-ray, that same type of radiation. Surgery is that they're going to do some sort of surgery to cut out the piece of the cancer. There's at-home medications. There's even oral chemotherapies nowadays. There's also immunotherapy, which is a little bit newer, and it kind of really triggers your immune system to then treat the cancer almost on its own. It's a little more pinpointed and targeted. And there's the watch and wait approach, which sometimes certain cancers, we may say we're going to watch it. We're going to rescan in 3 months and then decide what we're going to do from there, which sounds really good because I don't have to do all these other things, but is sometimes a little bit emotional in terms of feeling of I'm not actually doing anything right now. So those are some of the different treatments that patients may be going through, some of those parents that you're dealing with or their children. There's a lot of side effects from all of these different types of treatments. And it's important to know what some of those side effects are. And we're going to talk a little bit about how, as the school system, it's really helpful to know that information as well. Some parents may talk to you about the child may talk about their parent being in remission, which means there's no evidence of the cancer right now. We don't usually use the word cured. We use the word remission, meaning we've done a scan and we're not seeing it right now. And a recurrence means when that same cancer comes back, either in the same location or at times it does come back in other areas. And then you're also dealing sometimes with terminal illness, which is an illness, generally speaking, once we start using that term terminal illness, even though metastatic disease is a lifelong illness, we don't usually focus on the terminal piece of it because thanks to modern medicine, some people have metastatic disease for 10, 15 years. Whereas terminal illness, we more think of really those last, more of the end of life, the last 6 months, 8 months, things of that sort. And we're kind of getting to that last line of treatment, or when there's no treatment left either. So I spend a lot of my days teaching parents, again, encouraging them to talk to their schools. But I spend a lot of time teaching parents to talk to their kids about cancer. And so these are some of the things that I would explain to them. And so as the school, it's important to kind of get to know some of this information as well. So I encourage them to be honest, use the word cancer, because again, we are going to define it for them. And it's really important that they understand the difference between cancer and taking chemotherapy for cancer as opposed to mommy's sick and taking medicine. Because the next time that child is sick and goes to the doctor for an earache and they get medicine, they may not want to do it because look at what mommy's medicine does. And so we want to teach them those differences because that makes other things a little bit less scary for them. We're going to really encourage age-appropriate language. What does your child understand? What are they, you know, a 8-year-old's understanding of how the body works might be different than the junior who's in AP Bio and knows all about cells and probably more than I do about, you know, genetics and how all of that types of stuff works. So we're going to use that age-appropriate language. What do they understand, and what are we able to say to them? So when explaining a diagnosis, we talk a lot about their body parts. Even just with my own kids, because they know I work in a cancer center, they'll sometimes ask me questions about things. I take them to the ovarian cancer walk, and now they're asking questions about what's ovarian cancer and what does that mean. So we talk about different parts of the body. You're going to identify those. What's the prognosis? Some kids really want to know that information. Most kids really want to know that information. And what are the treatments? We want to explain to them what's going to be happening. And provide updates. The same way I want to know if my kid has a test next Tuesday and then how they did on the test. You're having a scan next Tuesday. They're going to want to know how the scan went. So we want to give them those regular updates and keep them a part of it. Make it so it's an everyday conversation, as opposed to this is something we discuss at family meetings only on Sunday nights in a very serious manner, as opposed to just cancer is part of our lives and we can talk about it every day, because then it becomes an open conversation. Always encourage them to ask questions. And as the school, it's great to tell them to ask questions, to talk about things, to talk to their parents about it, and to answer the unasked questions. I oftentimes tell parents to answer those questions, and we're going to talk a little bit about what some of those really hard questions are and how to answer them. So the school is really a partner for parents, and I really encourage that because again, with my own kids, I really believe that. I really think it's important to have an open dialogue and not just wait until that moment of crisis. So for example, if a parent is diagnosed with cancer and we didn't tell you about it for 8 months and things are going all kinds of haywire, and then down the line, mom's all of a sudden hospitalized and there's this trauma going on, and now the kid's getting picked up by somebody different today, and like things are just all over the place and she's not going to come home for 3 weeks. That's very crisis oriented. That's a lot. And we don't even have a basis for where any of that information came from. So it's really great to have an open dialogue. Let's make this something that we can talk about and really be a part of in some way. Ask questions about diagnosis and prognosis. And we'll talk a little bit about why that's so important. What does your child know? So when the parent says to you, I just want you to know I've been diagnosed with breast cancer, I think it's really important for you to know, what does the child know? Maybe the child doesn't actually even know yet. I had a mom say to me one time, who I had encouraged to talk to her kids about cancer, and she thought, well, I'm just having a mastectomy, so I'm not gonna tell, I don't want to tell the kids, I don't want to upset them, I'm not going to use the word cancer. They knew she had surgery. But she did tell the school, and she had told some friends, her girlfriends, who happened to be moms of other kids in the school. And then her kids came home one day and said, Mommy, we heard you have cancer. So it's really important that we know, what does the child know? How were they told? What were they told? And that's why for parents, it's really great to be completely honest, because now they're not going to find out information from somebody else that you didn't tell them. Nobody can mess it up for you. You don't have to remember which story you told to which person and how. Are they allowed to tell others? Are the kids allowed to talk to their friends about it? Are they allowed to tell the soccer team? Is this a secret for a particular reason? Let's try to find out a little bit more information. And are there changes in their mood or their behavior? Are you noticing anything at home? So those are some questions that you can talk to the parents about. And how has this affected your routine? What's the schedule? What are visitors like? Do you have caregivers? You know, are different people going to be picking up the child? It's really helpful. I tell parents this is not a great time for surprise visitors who pick, you know, grandma all of a sudden picks them up on Tuesday at school, but where's my mom? There must be something wrong with my mom today. So it's really helpful that the kids fully understand what's happening, who's coming to get them. They need to know what's going on. But as the school, it's really helpful to know that schedule. So for example, you say to them, can you just give me a little bit of insight into what the schedule looks like and what the treatments are? So for example, the mom tells you that every other Tuesday she's going to have chemotherapy, and you assign a test for Wednesday. So chances are on Tuesday, maybe mom didn't really feel up to helping the child study, and dad was, you know, helping take care of mom. So grandma was there babysitting, but she's really helpful, but not necessarily when it comes to studying for math tests. You know, it doesn't mean that you're not going to make the child take the test, but maybe there could be a little bit of wiggle room. Do they take the test on Thursday because mom feels better on Wednesday than on Tuesday? You know, try to get a feel for what's happening. Are they having surgery? Let's try to plan things a little bit that way as well. Maybe they can take you give them the reading assignment a week earlier than you give it to the other kids, so they have that extra time before the assignment is due to really start working on it, because that's the week that mom feels better, because next week she has treatment and she doesn't feel well. So it's not a lack of parents wanting to help. It's sometimes we have to work with when the mom or dad feels the best to help them. So it's really helpful to kind of know that schedule. It may feel a little bit nosy asking those questions, but if you frame it in that sense of, we're really just trying to make sure that we can help your child the best, that would be really helpful for us to know. If anybody else on here is a parent, you'll know that it's really hard to put yourself first. We always put ourselves second to our child, and the sick parent is going to really have a hard time putting themselves first and remembering that today taking a nap is going to make me a better mom in the long run. Because I'm a mom, I can't go take a nap in the middle of the day, right? But if it's part of my treatment and taking that nap is actually going to help me be the best mom in the long run, that's a really great thing. And as the well parent who's now putting the needs of their spouse ahead of their own and their children ahead of their own, and still trying to work, clean the house, and do 16 other things, getting to that spelling test is going to be really hard. So it's really important that we remind parents, it's okay. We know that you're doing your best. We know that you're struggling with all of this. Some days you feel like you're drowning, and you know, we're going to throw you that lifeline. What can we do to make this a little bit easier for you? And so the more times that they can hear from people that it's okay to take care of themselves and okay to take a break for a few minutes, the better off they will be. I can promise you that in their cancer center, they're already hearing that. But if you as the school take away some of that guilt, as opposed to, no, it's the test is Wednesday, they have to take the test Wednesday, that's not going to help them. That's not going to make them feel better. So it's important that we kind of work with parents in those moments, and work with those kids, because that's a lot of trauma, as we just heard. That's a lot of trauma for them to be hearing repeatedly in their own house. And so we want to make sure we're really mindful of that. There's some really great websites out there that offer that help to families, because it's really hard to pick up the phone and ask for help. It's really hard for me to pick up the phone and say, can you give my kid a ride tomorrow because I just can't do it? Or can you actually make dinner for my family because I'm just not up to it? That's a really hard thing as a parent to say to people. So there's some really great websites out there that I encourage people to use. This is just one of them, lots of helping hands. There's Caring Bridge and lots of different options. I think this is a great task to give a friend to do as well, on your behalf, and to make up that list that every other Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday would be really great if somebody could bring dinner and just drop it off. And maybe on Thursdays, somebody can take my daughter to ballet, and Saturday somebody has soccer, and getting that help around the house is really going to be a huge help. Encourage some normalcy, schedules, play dates, tutors, rides for things. Again, when we're not in the middle of COVID and we don't have to worry about who's coming in and out of our houses, these are some really great things to encourage that normalcy within the home, which will make things a little bit easier usually for the child. So I'm going to talk about red flag behaviors, which is not necessarily a bad thing. A red flag behavior doesn't mean this kid is lost and we're never going to get them back. A red flag behavior really means these are some things, this is kind of an outward sign from the kid saying, I'm having a little trouble here. It's almost like waving the white flag. So kids who are, if you notice a difference in their eating habits, they're never eating lunch. Maybe they're, sometimes it may be that they can't afford lunch anymore. We've got all these hospital bills, we have all this other stuff. Maybe they're actually just, they're bringing this tiny little, cheese and crackers every day because A, that's all they could afford, or B, there's nobody home to make their lunch. So those, just some little signs, or they're just genuinely not hungry. Those are some things to look out for. What am I noticing? Because maybe things are a little bit harder at home than we've been let on. So definitely keep an eye out for those things in the lunchroom or at snack time. Toileting, kids who are, in second grade may have an accident at school. Kids who are in, sixth grade may wet the bed. We have this regression. It's kind of like if I were given really bad, devastating news, even as a grown-up, I kind of want to curl up in a little ball in that fetal position and just have somebody hold me, like my mom did when I was little. It's that feeling of regression, and so that's perfectly normal, but it is a sign that something else is going on, that we want to start talking about some of those feelings. Are they sleeping too much? Are they sleeping too little? If they're always tired in class, falling asleep on their desk, are they not getting sleep at home because they're helping their mom or because they're worried about their mom? What's happening there? Their mood, are they depressed? Do they seem sad all the time, down? They're not laughing the same way they usually do. Are they angry? Teenagers are really, there's a lot of anger that comes out in those ages oftentimes. And so it's helpful to know too, is this typical teenage anger, or is this, because of what's happening at home? So good things to keep an eye out. What are some of those behavioral changes that we see? Behaviors such as withdrawing, acting out. Are we noticing a kid who's normally doing the right thing is all of a sudden doing the wrong thing? Sometimes at home, they're doing the wrong thing because if my mom feels good enough to yell at me for doing the wrong thing, then she's feeling well enough. So that's my way of gauging whether or not my mom's doing well today, because if she wasn't, she'd let me get away with this. They almost need somebody to set those limits for them. Two I should put on here is stomach aches or psychosomatic illnesses, issues. My son, my father had died last year in October, and I know for about, it was a good 6 weeks or so after my son went back to school, he ended up in the nurse's office all the time with stomach aches. And it was he's a very sensitive little kid, but he doesn't like to talk about a lot of his feelings. He doesn't like to talk about anything that hurts too much. And we had to really talk through that and really talk through identifying the difference between a stomach ache because you feel like you're going to throw up, and that stomach ache from being sad and worried and upset. And so it just allows for conversation. And that's why I point out that it's really important for everybody in the school to kind of be on board with this. It's not just the teacher who's in the classroom with the child. It's not just, the guidance counselor, because the kid doesn't necessarily say they're sad. They say they have a stomach ache. So it's helpful that the school nurse knows about it. So we want to make sure everybody's kind of playing that part. Some control issues, even as grown-ups, when life feels really out of control over here, I overcompensate and I overly control everything over here, whether that's my own behaviors or other people's. I start cleaning incessantly, I organize everything, I study, these are the things that I'm trying to control because my life here is so out of control. So again, nothing that's terrible, but just things to let us know that there's more happening. And maybe some questions we want to ask. Then we have our green flag behaviors. What are some great signs that a kid's coping pretty well? some strong support networks. If kids have a lot of friends, they have people around them, they're going to soccer practice, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're coping well. They're really, this is a piece of their life, but the rest of their life is still going on. I had one kid I would do counseling for, and the first few times I saw her, she was always talking about her mom's cancer, and she didn't even have time for her friends because she couldn't, I can't believe my friends are even worried about what movie we're seeing tonight. I have such bigger things to worry about. And after a few weeks, she was caught up in the friend drama. And every time she came to see me, she was, telling me about friend drama. And I was like, this is really great. Because if you're worried about your friends and you're invested in this system over here, chances are the cancer isn't as overwhelming in your life. It doesn't mean that you're, somebody's getting better or worse or anything else. It just means that you're doing okay with it. You're coping with it. You're processing it. And it's become a part of who you are. Open dialogue about cancer. Are they asking questions? Are they talking about it? I've had so many parents get so sad, and they get so, choked up as they say to me, my child asked me if I'm going to die. And I said, I want you to know that's such a beautiful thing, because even as a grown-up, to look at your parent and say, are you going to die, is one of the hardest questions you could ever possibly ask. And so if your child feels well enough and feels connected to you enough, and this beautiful moment where they can actually get those words out, that's a great thing. And so if you as the teacher or the school professional is being asked that question, they have a bond with you, they have a connection with you, and that's a beautiful thing. And we'll talk about what some of those ways to answer those questions are, but I want you to know that's not something to shy away from. That's actually a great a sign of a great relationship. Do they keep a schedule, a routine? Things are not so haphazard. We're pretty standard. These are, who's picking them up on these different days and things of that sort. Really little kids, really great to keep an eye on their pretend play. Themes that are happening at home are going to be mirrored in their playing with their dolls or their Barbies or whatever they have. If you've ever toilet changed a 2-year-old, every doll in the house is suddenly on the toilet. Because that's what we're talking about at home right now. So when you're watching them play, if mom's on this, we lay the mom doll on the sofa, and the kid's over here, we have to whisper because mommy's sleeping. She doesn't feel good today. Those are some signs. That's what their house looks like. They're giving you a little glimpse into their world. And so just keep an eye on their play. And some of those feelings may start to come out, and you'll start to see some of those things. And then positive coping strategies, and we'll talk in a minute about what some of those are. So school can be a comfort for kids, and again, totally outside of the world of COVID. So school is a comfort because they're there all the time. And this is a great place because I have 6-7 hours a day where I don't have to think about cancer. I think for kids right now who have cancer in their home, and say, for example, they're doing virtual learning, they never get a break from cancer. They never get a break from that household. And so I think it's really difficult. And I've had parents share that with them. It's also difficult for those kids too, because now they worry about bringing germs home to make mom sick, and it's adding a lot. It's definitely adding a lot. So in the normal everyday world where kids are at school all the time, it's a great distraction from every day and what's happening. So that school is their place of comfort, that place where they feel like they can just kind of escape for a little while. It's really great that as the professional and the person in their lives that grown up, that you share an interest in them, not just because somebody in their family has cancer, but with all of your students and with all of the kids that you interact with. Hey, Tommy, how was your soccer game this weekend? Oh, Megan, you went to the beach this weekend. Did you find any shells? What was it like? What did you do? Because the more they get to talk to you about things that are really comfortable, the more they'll feel they can talk to you about things that are a little bit more uncomfortable. And you've shown an interest in them. You've shown that you genuinely care about them. And kids really, it's almost like this, like a celebrity. These are these grown-ups who are, my teacher came to my soccer game after school. Wasn't that so amazing? When you show that genuine interest, they're going to know that you care about more than just what they got on their math test today. So that's going to allow them to feel like they could talk about some more important issues as well. Be approachable, check in with students. It's really important to talk to students and to their parents as well, particularly though to the students, and to say, you know, when you first talk to them about cancer, to say like, I want to check in with you, but I also want to be mindful of your privacy. I want to be mindful of, I don't want to ask you in front of your friends because I don't want to make you uncomfortable. Is there a best way that you want me to ask you about it? Is there, you know, could you let me know if there's a day where you want to talk about it and where you don't? Because school may also be their distraction. So if you're constantly saying, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? It becomes overwhelming again. It's not a check-in, it's too much. And maybe today they don't feel like talking about it. I had this awesome patient who told me this great story. She would go meet her girlfriends every other week for lunch during her chemotherapy and throughout all of her treatment. And she told me she would have lunch with her girlfriends. Some weeks it was meant to be a distraction from the fact that she had cancer. And other weeks she was there and she genuinely wanted to talk about it and she was okay with people asking about it. So her way of letting her friends know was to bring a little pink elephant. And if she put the little stuffed pink elephant on the table, today is okay to ask me about cancer. And if I don't put that little pink elephant on the table, please don't ask me about it today. I'm here as a distraction. So maybe with your students, you can talk to them, you know, do you want to put like a little keychain on your backpack on a day that it's okay to, if I ask you or I check in with you, or, you know, if you're having a bad day, maybe you could put a you know, a white keychain on, or whatever it is, you know, some sort of outward sign so that they can let you know how they're feeling without maybe having to say it either directly to you or even with their friends. Maybe just give them that information that it's okay to talk about, but that you also don't want to overwhelm them. You want to kind of put the ball in their court. And validate their feelings and all of the feelings that come with cancer. And there's a lot of them. So that feeling of sadness, and the reason why I say validate them is because if I come to you and I say, I'm terrified, I just got diagnosed with breast cancer, I'm so scared, I don't know what to do. And you as my friend, your first response is, don't worry about it, don't worry about it, you're gonna be fine. Well, now you've just dismissed me, and now I don't feel like my feeling of being worried is valid. And so I want you as the professional to say to that child, it's okay to be sad. You know what I do when I'm sad? So now you've validated it to them. You can even say to them, it's okay to be sad. Can you tell me a little bit about what's making you sad, or how you're feeling, or, you know, what you like to do when you're sad? It engages them in that conversation and lets them know that there's that chance to talk about it. Kids sometimes feel like they caused this to happen. They're the reason why their parent has cancer. So they have feelings of guilt. So that's important too, that we want to acknowledge those feelings of guilt as being very real. They may feel angry, especially as I said earlier, teenagers oftentimes have that feeling of anger. Embarrassments. No kid really wants to be the kid that's different. So having a mom that comes to pick them up and she's bald is embarrassing. And it's not anything they're not being mean to their mom. It's just, that's embarrassing. And it's okay to appreciate that and to talk through that with them, and to say to them or to their mom, you know, let's talk through that. You know, would you rather if your mom came in a wig? What do you prefer your mom to wear? Do you mind if she wears the scarf? How do you feel if she were to wear a hat? So you can talk to them about it and let them be a part of that moment, because it's okay to be embarrassed. They're a kid and they don't want to be different. And so we can't kind of hold that against them in some way. And they may have feelings of happiness. I know that sounds completely crazy. Some kids are happy about cancer because now grandma's over every day, and I love my grandma, and who doesn't want her to come over every day, right? And I get to go on play dates to my friend's house because my mom is, you know, taking a nap in the afternoon. So I get to go to my friends every single day, or, you know, just the overwhelming visitors, or dad who works in the city 12 hours a day is suddenly home all of the time. It's okay for them to be happy about those pieces of it. And so we can validate all of those feelings. And I would say allow for conversation in the classroom, allow for them to talk about it. Let them know that school is a place where you can talk about things, even if they're not so easy. Because we want to make sure that they feel like they have a place for talking about what's happening in their lives. Some positive coping strategies. We talked about having that strong support network. I would say if they're talking and laughing, and even if they're crying, crying is a beautiful thing. It's allowing that emotion to come out. That's actually a really positive thing. They're letting out that sadness. And that's a great opportunity, like I said, to talk to them about, you know what, I get sad too sometimes, and here's what I like to do when I'm feeling sad. Intimacy, if they're touching and hugging and cuddling and being close with other people, those are all positive coping strategies. Friendships are great. Kids who are really socialized usually have a little bit of an easier time going through this. They feel like they have other people to lean on in all of this. Positive, trusting relationships with adults. Sometimes that's the soccer coach because they're at soccer more often than they're anywhere else, or it's the, you know, my piano teacher because I'm with my piano teacher 3 times a week, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter who that relationship is, but those positive adults in their lives. I had one child tell me he would go to the principal's office. He cut out all the middlemen, no guidance counselor, no nothing. It was the principal, because when the principal found out that his mom had cancer and was very sick, the principal called him in, and his dad was with him too. And he said, you know, I just wanted you to know my mom had cancer when I was little too. And so I know a little bit about what you're going through. So if you ever feel like you need somebody to talk to, you can come talk to me. And it was this beautiful relationship between the principal, who we normally think going to the principal's office is not the best thing, but he felt this connection to his principal, and that was the person that helped him through this. Kids who are journaling, they're getting out their feelings in writing, in their music, they're exercising, activities, games, things, any way that the child can get those feelings out is a great way. Kids are really egocentric. The whole world revolves around them, right? And that's not a bad thing. That's just the way kids are. Kids, generally speaking, they need to know, how is this all impacting them? So if I say as the parent, I'm going to have treatment next Tuesday, they're only thinking of, well, I have hockey practice Tuesday. How am I going to get home? Who's going to pick me up from school? How are we going to have dinner? Who's going to watch me? What's taking place? So they need to know, how does this all come back to me? We want to validate their feelings, alleviate any blame they're having. You didn't do anything wrong. Nobody did anything wrong. Mom didn't do anything wrong. And then give them these concrete examples of how this is going to affect them. And kind of let them have that moment. I always picture when my kids were really little, we were in the middle of Hurricane Sandy, or we knew it was about to happen, right? And I remember my son, who was terrified of the dark, and he was like, I don't know, 3 years old. And I thought, oh my God, it's going to be dark for days. What are we going to do? So I gave him his little flashlight. I did all these things. I started prepping him before the lights went out, and we, got to talking about it. And I gave him his little tool. And so when the lights went out and he was terrified, I said, okay, I know that you're scared. His name's Kyle. So I said, Kyle, I know that you're scared. I'm a little scared too, because I don't love to be in the dark, but that's why we're in the dark together. Okay. I promise you, that a grown-up is always going to be with you when the lights are out, because I know that it's scary to you, but so I promise that some grown-up is always going to be here, either me or daddy or maybe grandma, but there's always going to be a grown-up here, because we're not going to leave you alone. I know that you're scared about being in the dark. You didn't do anything wrong. Nobody did anything wrong in this situation. It's just, there's this big storm, and here's what happened. And I described how the wind came and the trees knocked down the poles and everything else. And here's what's going to happen. We're going to be here together. They're going to try to fix it, but it's going to take days. I gave them a little bit of a timeline. I kind of gave them that information, but I really just tried to reassure him. And I did this day after day after day after day. And so finally one day the lights came back on, and we were all so excited. And then that night they went out again. And my husband, who was so excited because he was going to get to watch this football game on TV, he was all excited. He was like, oh, great, the lights are back on. And then that night when we had dinner and they went off, he was furious. He was like, oh man, the TV, I can't believe what happened to the lights. And my son, who was 3, turned to my husband and said, Daddy, it's okay. It's okay. We're all here together. We're going to be okay. Don't worry. The lights are going to come back on again. And so here was this 3-year-old who was trying to reassure his dad that everything was going to be okay, because we had given him this mantra over and over again. It's going to be okay, because we're always in this together. There's always going to be people to take care of you. We always love you. You didn't do anything wrong. And we really want to validate all of those feelings all together. So some of the tough questions that kids ask about cancer are, is my family member going to die? And again, I always say that's not a bad thing. That's an okay question to ask, because as a grown-up, we know that people do sometimes die from cancer. Will the cancer come back? So when you tell your child, tell a child that they had surgery and they cut out the cancer, well, is it going to come back? Can I catch cancer? Is it contagious? And we talk a little bit about how this isn't like having a cold. Is it my fault? Is it that day that I told somebody I would rather have a different mom because my mom was yelling at me, or because I didn't clean my room well enough and I stressed her out, and is it my fault? Some other tough questions are, who will take care of me if something happens to my mom and dad? And so these are questions they may pose to their parents, or they may pose them to you, because you've now maybe become that trusted adult. Maybe they don't feel like they can ask their parents these questions, so they've now asked you. And so here are some great ways to answer that, because I always tell parents, because one of the roles that I have at work is to do counseling for their children. So I always tell parents, it's not my job to tell them information that they haven't already heard from you. I'm not going to tell your child that, yes, you may die from this cancer, if you haven't already explained that to them. If you haven't had that conversation, that's not going to come from me. So my response is to bring it back to the child. Well, what do you think? What do you think? When they ask that question about who can take care of them, or is it contagious, or is my mom going to die? So those are some, that's a great question to ask. What do they think? It's great to know what was already in their minds. And then bring it back to the parent. Have you asked your mom or dad? And if they say yes, that's a great time to then say, well, then could you tell me a little bit about what your mom told you? What was the answer that they gave you when you asked that question? Another option is that they say, no, I haven't asked my mom yet. I had a kid who came to my office. We spent years together because her mom was sick for literally years. And it took her probably about 3 months to finally ask. She had asked me, and she finally said to me, I'm afraid my mom's going to die. And then it took her, after we had this conversation, a couple more weeks before she was finally willing to ask it to her mom. And it even came with me prepping her mom by saying, this is what your child's really worried about. I want you to know that this question is coming. Maybe you even want to answer it before she has the chance to ask. Because again, it's really hard to ask. Provide honest and accurate health information. Cancer is not contagious. You can answer their medical-based questions in a very honest in a very honest way, and again, give them that honest, accurate health information. And then provide reassurance that cancer just happens. You didn't do anything wrong. Your mom didn't do anything wrong. And that you will always be taken care of. And that's a really big piece in all of this. We want kids to know that even if something happens to their mom or dad, that somebody, look at all the people in your lives, maybe even ask them to identify who else is there in your life, who else helps you out, who comes over, who do you really trust, what are some of those other grown-ups? Those are some great questions. And you can say to them, it's important for you to ask your mom or dad. If that's what's worrying you, I want you to ask your mom or dad. So I work at the Carol G. Simon Cancer Center at Overlook, and one thing that New Jersey has no shortage of is really great medical care. Whether it's here in New Jersey or across the river in New York or down in Philadelphia, we have so many great institutions around us. And so all of those cancer centers pretty much will have a lot of these services available to patients. So when a parent tells you that they have cancer, you can remind them of all of these great resources that chances are right at their cancer center. And then in addition to that, there's also the cancer support community, or all these other great resources out in the community that provide parent education, individual counseling for patients and for their family members. What's really great is it's free of charge. Like if a patient comes to talk to me, or their child comes in, we're not going through their insurance. There's no copay, there's none of that. And so when they're worried about money, those are some things that they may be talking to you about. We do family sessions, family workshops. I've talked at schools before. So all of those services, again, are provided. And so it's a great resource to send those parents to. If you're feeling overwhelmed or feeling like this topic is really out of my league, these are some great ways that we can try to get them some information and to get them some support as well. So I think that concludes the, the whole idea. Ultimately, my takeaway for you is simply that we're all kind of, again, we're a team in taking care of our kids. And so however you feel like you can be a resource to that child is a beautiful thing. And at the end of the day, what I love about my kids' school is that I feel like when I send my kids to school, not only are they going to learn a lot, but they're really going to feel like they're loved and that they're cared about. And so just knowing that their teachers are there for them is tremendous. And I tell parents all the time, if your kids can talk to you about cancer, and you can talk to them about it, chances are when any other thing comes up, they're going to feel like they can talk to you. So that includes, problems at school or relationships or things of that sort. So it's really important to encourage that positive and honest communication. So if anybody has any questions, I think we'll check the chat. Oh, I wanted to give you, these are some resources here, and they're included on the end of the presentation. Some different resources, some websites that have great information. The American Cancer Society has really great information, just perfectly educational resources on how do kids talk about cancer and different types of things. And then there's also some great books available as well. So you can look through, and if you have questions, my contact information is at the end, and you can always feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to talk at any time.